Hi, this is Nahid Kazaza, and I'd like to welcome you to our Quick and Easy Resume and Cover Letter video series. This is video 4 in a 5-part series. In our first video, we introduced the Aspire template for resumes that has 6 simple sections in it. We also talked a little bit about your resume format. In video 2, we went through the first 3 sections of your resume, the heading, the objective, and the summary of skills. In video 3, we dove into your work history, and we talked more than just about the format of your work history. We talked a little bit about the difference between responsibility and accomplishment statements, and how to go about creating great statements that really bring your resume to life. In this video, we're going to go over the last 2 sections, education and other categories, and we're also going to talk about common red flags and how people get stuck. So the education section is pretty basic. You want to list your schools, your degrees, and your dates of completion. But the most important thing is you want to be honest. Education is one of the few things on a resume that can actually be checked right up front, and so people do check it. And if you think of it as not too significant, if you make the mistake of thinking, oh, education, it's at the bottom of the resume, it's not too significant, I was close enough to completing my degree, or I think this is the name of my school, that's where you could get burned, because an error in the name of the school or saying that you graduated in a different year than you actually did, so that when the registrar is called, they can't find you in their system. It's really important to be honest here. Now, you don't have to have a lot of details. You can just have the school and the degree, because for most jobs what they're looking for is that you actually have a degree. You can include your grade point if you're really proud of it, and you can include a few honors, but you don't need to make this a really big section, again, unless you're closer to entry level and unless there's a lot of stuff that happened in your education that's relevant to the job you're targeting. If so, then save some room and put some accomplishment statements in your education section. But again, it all depends on where you're at in your career and how relevant your education is to the job that you're targeting. For other categories, this is where you put things that you really don't have on any other place to put. So an example might be different languages. Let's say you're bilingual or trilingual and you didn't happen to put it into your header. You might put that also in your header. But let's say you're bilingual or trilingual. That's a great thing to put on your resume. You can also put things that you feel you want people to know about you. I would stay away from things that aren't relevant, like whether you're married, how many kids you have, any of that stuff, unless, again, you think it's relevant. So, for example, if you're applying for a job where you're working with kids, the fact that you have kids might be relevant. If you are applying to a Christian company and you happen to be Christian and you do a lot of work in your church, that might be something you want to include because you feel that it's relevant. One thing I did on a resume once was I put the pronunciation of my name. And the reason is because my name is Nahid. It's a foreign name. And if someone just sees it written down, there's a good bet that they might make the assumption that I don't speak English very well. And the jobs that I apply to tend to require really good communication skills. So it was important for me to put down that I was a native-born American and I had excellent communication skills, and I used the other categories to make that comment at the bottom of my resume. And I also put the pronunciation of my name phonetically at the top. And that, in fact, got me pulled out for one of my jobs because the person looking at resumes was so appreciative that I was considerate enough to put the pronunciation of my name on the resume. So sometimes these things you put in the other category are little things that nobody has to know about you, but you choose to include because you want them to know. Let's look at red flags. Spelling errors, of course, they always tell you this. The one thing I should tell you is that spell check will not catch all your errors, and having one person proof your resume will also not catch all your errors. You know why spell check won't catch all the errors, because if you have the word there in there and you're using it incorrectly, but you have it spelled right, it'll look fine to Word, to the automatic spell checker, but it's going to read incorrectly. People make huge judgments about having spelling errors on resumes, so it's worth the time to get 3 or 4 people to read it very carefully and try to catch any kind of spelling and grammar errors. And if you've got 2 people disagreeing on how you should say something, where you should put the commas, etc., get it resolved. Make sure you get to someone that gives you an answer that you feel pretty comfortable with, because spelling and grammar is one of the few ways that people have to judge you initially when they look at your resume. Okay, too hard to read. Usually it's too hard to read when people are trying to cram too much information in the resume and the font gets too small and the margins get too small and there's no white space. If you make your resume too hard to read, nobody will read it. It won't even get pulled out of the pile. A functional resume. It's not so bad to do a functional resume, especially if you are looking for a job that has nothing to do with your most recent job. But it's important not to hide your work history. So if you're going to do a functional resume, what I suggest is you expand your summary of qualifications section and you add accomplishment statements right under your summary of qualifications that are very specific to the job that you're targeting. So basically what you're doing is you're pulling accomplishment statements out of your work history and you're putting them right up at the top so that it doesn't matter where you got that experience, but that's the experience you have that's relevant to the job that you're targeting. But you still include your work history and all the dates, just in a more compressed form, a little bit lower down in your resume. It's really important not to hide your work history, because that's a red flag. People are always looking for it on your resume, and if they don't see it, they're going to assume that you're hiding something. It's also okay if you have a 2 or 3 year gap in work. Maybe you were laid off and it just took a long time to get a job, and now you're ashamed of that. You don't need to hide that. People look for authentic people. Come up with a positive spin on the time that you had off and write that the time was off and what you did. But also, if you have a lot of time off, there may be part-time jobs that you did during that time or projects that you did for people. So you may be able to fill in more of the space than you think with legitimate work experience. Because no matter what you're doing, whether you're getting paid for it or not, you're getting experience in life, you're getting experience in something, you're doing something, and usually you're learning from it. Okay, missing dates. I think I just touched on that. Not fitting in a category. The problem with not fitting in a category, if you don't use your objective to categorize yourself, is that people won't pull you out of the pile the first round. Because when people have a stack of 100 to 300 resumes and they're just trying to pull out the top ones really quick, they're not reading your resume, they're just glancing. They're only going to look at the title or the objective of your resume for the first few that they pull out. So that's why it's important to categorize yourself somehow. And vague generalizations. You know, when you talk about general strengths like people skills or organizational skills, but you don't give a lot of specifics, then you kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, because people say, well, everybody can say that they have good organizational skills. So because it's something that everybody can say, it's not as impressive. But if you, in one of your accomplishment statements, talk about something you organized, that's going to be more compelling and it will highlight a more general skill. All right, let's talk very briefly about how people get stuck. The 2 biggest things I see are people that don't know what job they want. I don't know what I'm looking for. I don't know how to answer the question, what am I looking for? And that's legitimate. Sometimes you don't care. You just want a job, or there's many different types of jobs that you could do. But the problem is with a resume, the resume is not going to be effective unless it's designed to a specific job that you're targeting. So you can't write an effective resume unless you have a job target. So you might have to pick 5 job targets and write 5 different resumes. But if you don't have a way to target a job, then you aren't going to be able to write a resume that's especially compelling. You'll just have to do your best, and then, you know, maybe get some coaching to help you target a job. Procrastination is a big one. Usually procrastination means you have an inner conflict or you're afraid of something. It's not such a bad thing. It just shines light on that inner conflict. This is more emotional stuff about job transition usually, not being able to figure out what you want to target, procrastinating, not feeling good enough, that sort of thing. And this is when you get the coaching. I can give you all the information you need in these videos when it comes to the tangible things you need to do to be successful. But when it comes to working out the emotional things that are holding you back, that's when it really is worth the investment to talk to a coach. Things to remember: your resume is not you. It just shows one part of you, so it doesn't have to be perfect. The resume itself is not going to get you a job. In some cases, your resume will be pulled out of a pile and you'll be called, but more likely than not, in this job climate, you'll be networking and you'll get a lead that way, and you'll be bringing your resume along with you to a meeting. So the resume isn't that important. It's just something people focus on a lot, so you want to have one that you feel comfortable with. And no matter how polished other people look about their job transitions, you need to remember that anybody who's in any kind of job transition is feeling some degree of insecurity and self-doubt on the inside, no matter how far down they have it buried. So don't feel ashamed if you're floundering. Just get a support system. There are many support systems out there for people in job transition, and don't be ashamed of it. Getting a support system can make a huge difference in your success. Our next video, we're going to be talking about cover letters. This wraps it up on resumes. So looking forward to talking with you then.